Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. I am, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. Thank you for joining me tonight. We got a awesome show for you guys tonight. Lots of football talk tonight. As you guys know, spring practice has officially begun as of yesterday, so we got tons of real football that's happening currently on the field to talk about, which always is exciting this time of year. We got the NFL draft, the NFL combine, and everything in between that we will discuss tonight. Can't wait to get into it. But before we get into all of those things in tonight's show, and before I bring on Jordan, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Also, hit that like button. Really helps us out on these live videos. And if you would like to support the show with a super chat throughout the show, please go ahead and hit that super chat feature. Me and Jordan will be sure to get to your comment, highlight it, talk about it a little bit, answer your question, or just converse with you about a comment that you had about the show or anything in particular that you want to talk about. So thank you guys all for being here tonight. And without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, my buddy, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing good. I've been kind of just checking my phone back and forth pretty much all day. Just kind of keeping my eye on the combine that's going on right now. There's just a lot going on. And then, of course, spring practice started yesterday, and, everything is full swing, and we're getting updates, and the Clemson football page is posting videos. We'll talk about all that. There's a lot to talk about. There's injuries to talk about. I'm just excited. This is one of the shows I look forward to every day. Well, I mean, I can't say every year. We've only been doing it for a couple of years now, but screw it. I'll say every year because I plan to be doing this for a while. But I'm excited, man, because this is one of my favorite times of the year when football is not being played.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Look, one of my favorite episodes that we do, regardless of time of year on the channel, is this episode. It's the kickoff of spring. We've been without football for a couple months now. We're just starving for some Clemson football, for some actual things happening on the field. We've exhausted everything there is to talk about with recruiting and, things that we want to see for spring. We finally get to hear the coaches talk a little bit, hear some players talk, hear from the media that gets to watch a very, very small condensed portion of practice, but still it's finally some feedback of real on the field stuff happening. And then one of the most exciting things that happens this time of year is we get our first look at all the new guys that came in, right? The guys that we've been talking about really since this time last year, right? When we were talking about the 2024 recruiting cycle, and now we get to see them on post or on campus, and we get to see them don that Clemson orange and get out there and, actually perform and see what they have against the rest of the talent that's already on the roster. So really is an exciting time, and we got a ton to get to tonight. But before we get into tonight's show and before we dive into our various topics, let's give a shout out to the comment section real quick. We got 14 people in the live chat right now. Several people have already commented. Thank you guys so much for supporting. Every time me and Jordan do the show and you guys show up and hang out with us, especially, at the end of February when there's no football being played, shows your level of craziness as a college football fan, first and foremost. But is also humbling in the same fact that you guys care enough to show up and hear what me and Jordan have to say about Clemson football. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And Tiggs is in the house. He was the first to get a comment in tonight. So shout out Tiggs. Nobody in particular. One of our regulars in here. Jay is in here. John Sprain's in here. Let's see. Jamarius Payne is in here. Almighty Finn is in here.
That's Insane Mob.
Insane Mob. Okay, I see. Yeah. I was about to say I don't recognize that screen name, but yeah, that makes sense now. So looks like his phone broke. So hopefully you get that worked out, man. That always is sort of a pain when those sort of things happen. But it is what it is. How'd your week go, Jordan? You busy at work? Anything crazy happening in your life? Any huge announcements to the YouTube folks out here?
No, not any particular. Well, not any that I would I would share. But it's been same old, and I've just been really looking forward to this show because, man, like I said, like it's been rough these past couple of months, just kind of sitting here with no football to talk about, recruiting
Yeah.
and all that. And so I got a lot of thoughts about some of the early returns on spring practice and kind of kind of the state of the program that Dabo sort of gave, and kind of his thoughts on what happened last year and kind of what they're trying to do moving into this spring practice, and some of the players that he's really high on, some of the players that he wants to see more from. There's a lot to go on, and of course we got to talk about injuries because it's Clemson football, and
It's Clemson football.
when do we not have injuries? But hey, I did say on a previous show, I was like, well, we're inevitably going to get some names that we haven't heard yet. But all things considered, you consider this time last year, the injury report for Clemson this time around is not anywhere as bad as it was last year. That was one of the most insane. I mean, you have basically your entire wide receiver room out last year, and you had all of this stuff going on. So you still have some key names that are limited or won't play in spring, but all in all, you'll have the bulk of guys that you expect to rely on this year available to play, and a lot of your true freshmen are going to be ready to go too. So it's about as good as you can ask for given Clemson football the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, man, we'll get into all of the injuries and all the names that we either expected to hear or didn't expect to hear a little bit later in the show. See, we got a couple more people that popped in here. Big Load is in here now. William popped in. So thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. Hit that like button while you were in here. Also, for those of you that are watching in the rewatch, me and Jordan post timestamps of each individual topic that we will cover tonight. So hopefully that helps you cipher through probably the 2+ hours that we'll be talking tonight to the different topics that you want to hear that we're going to cover. So thank you guys for watching in the rewatch. Hope you guys hit that like button and don't forget to comment for us. But Jordan, let's go ahead and segue into our first topic of the night. And we're going to obviously start with spring practice because that's what's going to take up majority of the show tonight, right? So real quick, I want to hit overall on kind of, spring practice beginning, right? It's officially kicked off. Started practice yesterday. We got to hear from Dabo Swinney, him kind of outline what the offseason has looked like so far for the Clemson Tigers. And one of the things that he kind of opened his press conference with that I kind of liked is he went into pretty good detail on what the coaching staff has been up to outside of recruiting since the season has ended for the Clemson Tigers. And, from what we heard from them, they've been pretty busy. And they did an in-depth self-scout. It sounds like they've been in the film room. They've been grinding away. They've been really preparing a big plan for this Clemson Tiger team as they convene on this spring practice. And I look for it to be a really productive spring practice, but more specifically about the self-scout, some of the big key topics that Dabo mentioned in his interview was obviously the turnovers. Everybody who watched Clemson football last season knows that the turnovers were a huge deal. They worked to the detriment of Clemson so many times last season, starting off with that Duke game. We will not repeat what happened. It was a massacre. It was a comedy of errors, if you will. It was everything, every way. Like it was a textbook of let's show you how to lose a game that you're not supposed to lose. And we did it in amazing fashion to start the year last year. And then he talked a little bit about some of the things that the offense did well, right? He talked about how the offense was like 15th in the country in first downs, right? They were really efficient at getting first downs. But then again, the turnovers reared their ugly head, which caused them to be really poor in scoring offense. There was a lack of explosive plays on the offensive side of the ball last year. I mean, they were just pretty much non-existent in that sense. And then talked a little bit about the defense and and their red zone woes and how they didn't have a terribly well percentage as far as red zone defense. Scoring defense wasn't great. Some of that was attributed to the turnovers and things like that.
A lot of
it. But one of the big things that I think is probably what I'm looking forward to see if Clemson can clean up during the spring and then heading into summer and fall camp is the explosive plays that we gave up on defense. That was one of the big things that was a constant last season. Was you just knew at some point in time that defense was going to give up an explosive play. It happened far too often, and that's definitely something they got to clean up. Obviously, the field goal kicking game, we all know the woes that Clemson went through last season with that, and then the punt return had some muff punts, had some serious issues with that, but he just gave kind of the blueprint, of what the coaching staff has been doing. So what were your thoughts on Dabo Swinney kind of laying that out in detail and letting everybody know, like, hey, we know the things that went wrong last year, and we're not burying our heads in the sand. We're making plans and we're making progress to get these things corrected and to figure out a way, one, why things went wrong, and then what do we do to correct those things that did go wrong a season ago. So what were your thoughts, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really jumped out to me was just kind of how, I don't know, how agitated Dabo came into that press conference. Not in a negative way, but it was clear, like just from his tone of voice when speaking about all of that. You know, you could tell how much last season weighed on him and all of the issues that last year's team had. And so that was one of the things that really like just jumped out, and it was a little bit different than years past. He kind of came into it a little more just you could feel the frustration emanating a little bit more from all of the things, just him thinking about it. You could tell it was weighing on him. And so I thought he laid it out pretty succinctly about how much they struggled with all of the aspects that you just mentioned. And he did hit the positives, like the first down thing, but he also followed it up and said, well, we still don't have that explosive. I think the words he used was explosive chemistry, so to speak. And so, and he indirectly referenced the wide receivers and the injury issues that happened there. And so I think he did a lot to love up on Cade, but also say he's got to do things better. He's like, yeah, the turnovers were bad, but he's got to get bigger and stronger. But the sacks and some of the interceptions, a lot of the interceptions weren't on him. I watched a lot of Clemson, and I rewatched a lot of Clemson of Cade Klubnik's snaps last year. But I'm not going to call into question that statement, because obviously Dabo knows the playbook way more than I do, and obviously what I'm seeing, I don't know what they're coaching Cade to do and all that. But regardless, I think he came into it with an idea of, I really need to bring out the best out of these guys. And so I thought someone said it in the chat, but I thought it was a really good way of putting it. It was John Sarian. Dabo has three priorities when he's in front of the mic: his players, followed by his players, and then his players. He's always talking to them, even if indirectly. That's why he comes across as a sunshine pumper. And I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it, and that you could kind of tell with just some of how he was discussing some of these players. So I thought it was a pretty it was a pretty honest evaluation of kind of where what he saw from last year, but mixed in with I want to bring more out of my guys, and so this is another way to do that. So right. That's kind of where I was, and it was a little bit different, but you saw some of the same elements from previous Dabo press conferences.
Yeah, I thought it was really an interesting way that he, as you mentioned, came into the press conference. Not quite how you typically hear him start an introductory press conference for, essentially what is a new team, starting the 2024 season, with kind of just telling them, that, all the stuff that went wrong last season in detail, and kind of laying it out there for everybody to know. And, everybody to hear, and just basically telling them like, hey, these coaches have been grinding. They haven't taken this 2-month vacation. They've been in the film room grinding, setting up plans for this team, and that's an exciting thing from a Clemson standpoint, from a Clemson fan standpoint, I should say. He did kind of call Cade out a little bit in the fact that, hey, he mentioned the things that we all know Cade needs to get better at. We talked about it at length on this channel, and I'm not hating on Cade at all. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he has the potential to be a really good quarterback for Clemson and to lead them to a lot of wins. I think he's still got a bright future ahead of him, but his pocket presence obviously needs to improve. His decision making obviously needs to improve. So it was good to hear him kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of own those things out in front of the media, and just not that he needed to or anything like that, but it's refreshing to hear that that's what the Clemson coaching staff has been working on since we last heard from them. Not that he owed that to us at all, but it was refreshing to hear as a Clemson fan that we truly are trying to correct all those things. They know what's going on, and they've made a plan to fix it. So I think that's all good stuff. And, I can't wait to see how the spring progresses, how his tone changes, the spring progresses, what guys flash, what problems or what key elements are identified in spring, whether they be good or bad. I think there's going to be a lot that may be able to be gleaned from this spring, just based off of, kind of the way that he rolled into the first spring practice press conference, I guess, for the 2024 season. So guess there'll be a lot more to come there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited to hear. I mean, it's we talked about kind of setting our expectations for how this spring, how we think this spring is going to go, and kind of what what our attitude going in is, and how we're going to process the information coming out. So that's always, it's easy to say that in the beginning, and then when you get into the swing of things and you hear, oh, this player is flashing and this player is flashing, and oh my God, this guy. And then you're like, oh, and you kind of get sucked in. We're going to try to not do that, but
yeah,
it's always tough. And, but and especially when you're a program that, and a fan base that, wants, you're kind of hungry for better days, so to speak, and not that these days are terrible. Clemson has certainly been worse.
Yeah.
And I've been alive for worse times in Clemson football history, but once you get a taste of that success, and especially it's not even just a taste. You had about, I mean, the playoff run was 6 years. I mean, it's a lot of time in college football, and it's a lot of time being in. It was a climb up to that point, and all of that success was like. It was something you never expected to have. And so now you're kind of starving to get back to that point. And so it's always like, oh man, maybe this is it. We're finally getting back to that point. And it's easy to kind of, latch onto any positive grain that comes out of spring practice and say, oh, we're back. And so that's kind of the tough part about, these spring practices, because if you're not there, you can only go off of what, people are saying, and what the coaches say, and what players say, and that's always difficult.
Yeah, and we felt like we've been duped in the past. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it's really hard not to get sucked in, right? Because we are diehard Clemson fans, and we want the program to get back to the place that it was, right? I mean, we spent the better part of a decade towards the top of college football. At the top or towards the top of college football for the better part of a decade. So it's tough to see the slide that has been the past 3 seasons. Albeit a lot of college football would love to be where Clemson's at currently right now. But we know what this Clemson program is capable of. And as fans, we're looking forward to getting back to what Clemson is capable of being. And that's a program that has a chance to win a championship year in and year out. Not that we're going to win a championship every single year, not that we're even going to be there every single year, but one of those programs that always has a shot, right, on any given year to have a real shot to challenge for the crown, right? So, and that's what we're looking for. So, more to come this spring. I'm going to temper my expectations, or I'm going to try. I'm gonna try not to get too high or too low based off of what's coming out of spring, or even what we see in the spring game. Try not to overreact too much. Just keep it as controlled as possible. But a lot easier said than done. We'll see how it goes, but I think we can go ahead and segue into our next topic. And what we're going to talk about next, Jordan, is the injuries heading into spring practice. You mentioned at the top of the show about how we were going to hear names that we didn't necessarily expect to hear. Guys that would be out or be limited, or that we wouldn't see at all this spring, and that was certainly the case. We got a pretty lengthy list from Dabo Swinney in that same press conference that we've been referencing the entire time on this show, and I'll quickly go through the list, and you could kind of give me your thoughts on the highlights of what you think this means for the Clemson team. Or are any of these injuries something you're concerned about for spring, or are you not concerned about any of them? So I'll quickly go through the list, and I'll turn it over to you to get your thoughts on it. So first and foremost, we got Sherrod Colville. He tore his ACL. He's not going to be back until the fall. Jaden Lucas had right hip surgery. Won't be back until the fall. Unfortunately, he spent a ton of time injured. Really hope he can kind of put it together and be healthy, because he's a heck of a cornerback when healthy. Walker Parks, he will be back in some semblance this spring. Could be just for individual drills. Probably won't be a full go on contact or anything like that. But he's not going to get he's going to get some work this spring. He's going to get some sort of individual drills. Probably a lot of mental reps, things like that. But we know what Walker Parks can do on the field. We really just need him to get healthy and stay healthy for an entire season, because the dude is an animal when he's on the field, and we miss him every time he's injured and off the field. That's been very evident over the past 2 seasons, well documented. Watson Young, ACL tear, won't be back until the fall. Armand Mason, he's got a stress fracture, so he's going to be completely out while he heals that up. Tyler Brown got that foot injury, right? So he's going to get some work in the spring, but will that turn into any live work? My guess is probably not. Maybe he'll get some individual work, some position drills work with the DBs, but I'm assuming they probably keep him out of contact for the entire spring. But again, I don't know. There's a possibility he could be back later on in spring as a full go. And then Corian Gibson, obviously he tore his ACL, had that surgery. He's going to work in spring, but Dabo made it clear that he will not have any live work this spring. So he'll probably run routes on air, maybe run routes against some DBs, but no contact drills, no live work. So at least he'll get some kind of work. Jay Haynes working back from a hamstring, apparently. I didn't know he had an injury. Apparently it's nothing serious. It's nothing that's going to affect him long term. He'll be back this spring at some point in time. He didn't really give a well thought out timeline for Jay Haynes, but that's a guy we need to see on the field this spring. He's going to be in a battle in that running back room to get carries and solidify a spot in there. So hopefully that hamstring heals up pretty quickly. Noble Johnson, he's going to be out for the entire spring. Ronan O'Connell, he's going to be limited this spring, but he will get some work. Brandon Strozier, limited this spring as well. And then Vic Burley and Ronan Hannafin working back pretty well. Not fully cleared yet, but they're going to get work this spring. Probably be back within the next week or so as a full go participants this spring. So like I said before, pretty lengthy list. Some names that we definitely expected to hear because we already knew about their injuries, but some other ones that we didn't know about that are fresh faces or new names that we didn't know were injured or didn't know would be limited this spring. What are your thoughts? Does this affect the Clemson roster in any way? Were you surprised to hear any of these names, and will they have any lasting effects?
Yeah. When I look at the list in its entirety, it's not the end of the world. There are some individual position groups where I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish you had them. I think defensive backs, the defensive back room, I think that kind of sucks not to have, Sherrod Koval, the guy that I was really high on coming out of high school. He's kind of been buried in that safety room. Clemson's had, has been pretty fortunate at retaining and having multi-year starters there. So it's kind of been tough for him to get on the field. Sherrod Koval, Corian Gibson, the true freshman corner, coming in. Obviously we knew about his injury, and so we knew that was going to be a rough. It was not likely he would be able to be a go for spring. But I'm still, I'm really high on him. He has a lot of scheme versatility. He can run. He's one of the fastest defensive backs in his class. So it sucks not to have him. I think the biggest thing is because you have such a young defensive back room now. And you have a lot of young players that are going to be stepping up. We've talked at length about Avion Terrell and Shelton Lewis, Kylan Griffin, guys like that, Khalil Barnes. And so you kind of want to have those guys in there competing with each other, and having a guy like Corian Gibson in the room, really talented freshman to push as well. That can only help. And then Jaden Lucas, it sucks again because he's been a guy that struggled with injuries for a long time, and he's going to be one of your more veteran corners this year, and so hopefully you want him to step into a bigger role as well, and so it sucks that he'll be limited. So I think of all the position groups, I think the one that jumped out to me was the defensive back room, just because you're going to have a lot of the youth this year, and it would be nice to have those guys, have all those guys together. Not having Tyler Brown, that kind of sucks. Full go, that kind of, you want him to be able to continue to build that rapport with Cade, because he's a guy that you're going to be relying on. But the wide receiver room in general, you have a lot of, you have most of the guys that you expect to rely on are there. Obviously, we know what's the situation with Noble Johnson, but you've got Adam Randall is fully healthy, as we'll talk about. Antonio Williams, guy that just had a horrible rash of luck with injuries last year.
Yeah.
We know what he can do when he's healthy. Troy Stellato. So you have Cole Turner coming back. That's big. You have I think the core of guys that I think this staff is expecting to rely on, for the most part, is intact. You just wish you had Tyler Brown there as well, because he's as good as any of them. And obviously not having Walker Parks sucks too, especially with a lot of having a new offensive line coach and he's trying to figure out what he has in this group and who he's expecting to rely on and who's going to play where. So not having probably arguably your best guy kind of sucks, but it does give a chance for you to build some depth behind him. That's always the upside is, you take a starter out of the equation. That's more reps for some of the younger guys. And there are a lot of guys on this roster that we've kind of been waiting on. There's a lot of talented pieces on this roster that we've been waiting on to kind of emerge, and it kind of opens the door for some of those guys. We've talked about it. Not just the older guys, but some of the true freshmen as well. So it'll be good. It'll be cool to see. Elijah Thurman is a guy that they've been really, really high on and been talking about. So, and a guy that maybe could potentially factor into the center position battle, at least maybe to some degree. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. But all in all, I think this injury list isn't nearly as bad as it was last year, and so I think that's the bright side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as deep or as long as it was last year for certain, and I don't think it affects us quite as much. You heard Dabo talk in his interview about having, I think he said, one scholarship player at the wide receiver position for last spring, which is crazy when you think about it.
Horrible,
I mean,
Awful.
absolutely ridiculous. Like, how do you build any continuity? How do you, learn each other's tendencies and get some chemistry and all that stuff that's so important when it comes to quarterback and wide receiver. So as much as it sucks that Tyler Brown's going to be out for a portion of spring, he will be back. He will get work this spring. So it's not like he's not going to do anything this spring, but initially he's going to be limited, and he's probably going to be somewhat limited throughout all of spring. Do they let him go full go for the spring game? I don't know. I guess that'll depend on the medical staff and how they feel that foot's doing, and really I think it'll depend on, I guess the risk of re-injury at that point in time. I don't think if there's risk for re-injury, I don't think you let him play in a spring game, right? Like he's too important of a player. We know what he can do on the field. We don't necessarily need to see him do it in a spring game. But it would be nice to get him some work with Cade, which I think will happen in spring. And that's one of the things that Dabo talked about, that what you mentioned earlier at the top of the show, that explosive, what did he call it?
Explosive chemistry was
there we go. Yeah. Explosive chemistry. And that's really what this offense needs to hone in this year. We have to become more explosive as an offense, and it's going to start with reps this spring. And thankfully, we have pretty much a full slate of wide receivers to work with this spring. I think it's going to be super important. Like I said, I don't think there's any injury here that really is that detrimental. I agree with your take on the DB room, right? Those two injuries kind of hurt a little bit, especially the Jaden Lucas, Sherrod Cole. You hate it for him because I think he has the ability to crack that rotation. If he could just stay healthy, because we've seen him on the field before when healthy, and the dude can play. He could flat out play. So he could definitely be a contributor this year. He's just got to stay healthy, got to get that ACL better. Some dudes bounce back from that a lot quicker than others. It's really hit or miss with guys. It's really on a case-by-case basis. So we'll see how he progresses, but he's not going to get any work this spring. That's for certain. But that's kind of it for the the injuries. I think Vic Burley, hopefully he's back in short order, along with Ronan Hannafin. Those dudes seem to be those two will probably be back the soonest out of all the ones we mentioned. And we need Vic Burley this year, man. He would have played last year. I think he's going to be a guy that can absolutely contribute this year. Mainly because of something we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, a couple guys moving to defensive end. So Vic Burley's going to have a little bit more opportunity at that defensive tackle position to really contribute to this Clemson Tiger team. So, I'm glad that the list is as short as it is. It does seem longer than I thought it would be. But again, it's always like that this time of year. Guys go in and get a scope of their knee or their ankle, get stuff cleaned up. They want to get guys fully healthy for fall camp. So it makes a lot of sense. But for the most part, I think this is as healthy as Clemson's been in quite a few seasons heading into spring practice. So that's a good thing because we need it. Dabo laid out all the things that this Clemson team needs to improve in 2024. So, here we are. Day 2 of spring is in the books. Still a lot of work to do, but it's really just time to get to work and see what this Clemson team can do for this spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And to those guys that are injured, only thing we can hope is speedy recovery for all of them. Injuries suck. That's unfortunately part of the game. But I still feel okay with where Clemson is from a roster standpoint and availability standpoint. A lot better than I did last year, that's for sure. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll next week there'll be a lot of stuff as they get into the full meat and potatoes of what they're install and all the stuff they're going to be entered. I don't know if they have a scrimmage next week. They might.
I think they do. Yeah, I think they have a scrimmage towards the end of next week.
Yeah. So. And we'll talk about some of that as well. And but let's hope, let's pray for no more
Yeah,
injuries too.
no new injuries. Hopefully we don't have a new injury segment next week when we do
Yeah.
this show, because there'll be nothing more to talk about. We would have already talked about all the injuries. That's the hope. That the hope is that we don't have to have a banner on the screen again this spring about new injuries.
Yeah.
So let's hope for that. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. But we got 34 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much for showing up. Really do appreciate it. Me and Jordan do this show, the All In Show, right here every Thursday, 7 p.m. We try to bring you guys the best content that we possibly can. I'm always humbled by the amount of people that show up. While you're in here, please go ahead and hit that like button for us. It really helps us out on these live videos. We're always trying to grow the channel. And if you like what we're doing here and you like the show, please hit that subscribe button so you can come hang out with us every Thursday when we do this show. We also do more shows during football season and all that kind of stuff. We always got good content coming out on this channel. So hope you guys subscribe and stick around. You don't have to be a Clemson fan to stick around. We mainly talk Clemson, but we also talk college football as well. Also, don't forget we got the super chat feature available if you want to support the show. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and segue into our next topic, Jordan, and that is going to be the off the field issues that unfortunately Clemson has dealt with this spring. Not something that Clemson deals with a ton. I mean, they do a pretty good job of kind of keeping their nose clean as a program and things like that. But we've had a couple things pop up this offseason, and it is going to affect spring for one player, and that is Noble Johnson. He's going to be out for the entirety of spring. Everybody knows that he was driving recklessly, got into an accident, and that is going to cause him to be out for the spring. Dabo did say that he is not suspended. They're keeping all that stuff program internal, just like I said they would when we first heard about DeMonte Capehart, right? Now, DeMonte Capehart, for example, all his stuff has since been dropped, and he's a full go for spring. He's going to be a full participant. No restrictions there. But again, I told you when Dabo was asked about it, just like he was on Wednesday, that his response would be team internal, right? And that's exactly what he said. Unfortunately, the accident will keep Noble Johnson out for the entirety of spring. But again, I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad the people that were involved are okay. It could have been a really bad situation. It could have gone a whole lot worse than it did. Same thing for DeMonte Capehart. Again, just a poor decision. It doesn't make them, bad people. Everybody has driven recklessly at some point in time in their life, has sped off and gotten to accidents and things like that. So, these dudes are just young and, they make mistakes sometime. And luckily it ended in an okay manner for all parties involved. So
Yeah,
what are your
absolutely.
thoughts on those two players? And then we'll kind of transition to our next topic.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we want to keep it football for the most part. But just to echo your sentiments, just glad both of them are okay, and it's they're gonna have to suffer consequences, obviously, and that's what life is. But great thing is they didn't have to. No one else had to suffer any severe consequences, and they won't have to. These two young men won't have to experience severe consequences because, those consequences can range from just a minor injury to losing your life.
Yeah.
Especially in the case of Noble Johnson. So, I'm glad that things went pretty much as well as you can ask for given the circumstances, and just hope they learn from it, and that's just kind of put a bow on it.
That's right. So wish them well. I'm sure they will go through whatever disciplinary things that the team will lay out for them. Look forward to getting Noble Johnson back on the field when he is healthy and through all of his off the field issues. But we'll go ahead and leave that there. Let's go ahead and transition to our next topic, and that is going to be the defensive end group heading into spring. Man, let me tell you, dude, this defensive end group is getting pretty interesting right off the rip heading into spring. Dabo gave some pretty, I don't know, I don't think it's shocking news by any means, but he definitely confirmed some rumors or some thoughts that a lot of Clemson fans had of what might be done with this edge position, with this defensive end position. We've talked at length on this show about the lack of depth behind TJ Parker on this defensive end group, right? You lose Xavier Thomas, you lose Justin Maskell, you lose a bunch of, a couple veteran guys that had a ton of snaps within their Clemson career. All that experience walks out the door, and TJ Parker's just kind of sitting here like, hey, who's going to be playing over there? Because I know I'm good, but I can only lock down one side. Okay, I'm really good, but I can only lock down one side. So Clemson's response to that, obviously, some people thought they would go to the transfer portal. Dabo said explicitly in his press conference that he didn't feel that anybody in the portal was going to come help them. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but at the end of the day, we have now moved Peter Woods and Caden Story to defensive end. I'm really excited about what these moves could do for the Clemson Tigers. I think it's going to work out pretty well for us. We all know what Peter Woods can do on the field. We saw his freshman campaign last year. He absolutely dominated in the middle of Clemson's defense. The superlatives for Peter Woods go on and on. He showed up to Clemson, and he was as advertised from jump. From day one, he was as advertised, and he didn't skip a beat throughout all of last season. I'm sure he'll slim down a little bit going to defensive end, but Dabo said that he would still play some defensive tackle throughout the season, specifically in passing situations. And then you got Caden Story. He's already trimmed down some, so he's gone from 280 down to 260, a little bit leaner, standing at 6'3". So excited to see what he could do at the end position and really contribute. And the reason that Clemson can make this move is look at the defensive tackle position, Jordan. Look at the names that you can rattle off for our defensive tackle, not mentioning Peter Woods, right? That's Trey Williams, DeMonte Capehart, Peyton Page, Stephylan Green, Vic Burley. The list goes on and on and on at defensive tackle. I mean, we could just roll these dudes in seemingly down after down and not miss a beat because it's deep and it's really good. So that affords us the ability to move a guy as good as Peter Woods last year was at the defensive tackle position. We can move him to end and probably not miss much of a beat at the defensive tackle position because of how deep it is, right? So that's an exciting thing. I think we'll be just fine at the defensive tackle position, obviously, because of all the names I rattled off. But listen to this, and this is something that I saw in an article, I think. The defensive end group outside of TJ Parker have 128 combined career snaps for Clemson. Peter Woods last year as a freshman tallied 307 snaps. So he's got more snaps as a Clemson player in one season than all the rest of the defensive ends do outside of TJ Parker in their entire career. That's crazy. That's wild. That's scary, the lack of depth that we have at that position. So thankfully, we got Peter Woods and Caden Story over there now, some guys with some real playing experience for the Clemson Tigers. Hopefully it works out. We'll see what the young guys behind them do. You got AJ Hoffler, Adam Kasai, who's, freshman. We'll see what he can do. Tall, lengthy dude. He's got to kind of fill out his body probably before he gets on the field very much. Cade Denhoff, we've mentioned him a couple times when talking about the end position, how well he played in that bowl game. Can he continue that and capitalize that in spring practice and throughout spring? And then Zaire Patterson, question mark. I mean, does he take a step?
Yep.
It's now or never for him, I think.
It certainly is.
It's now or never.
Yeah, and Dabo he's made it a point, multiple times to call him out specifically because I don't know. I really want him to work out But it is certainly now or never, because look at you just mentioned it. I mean, this room is only going to get better.
Yeah.
You mentioned Adam Kasai, Darian Mayo as well. I'm really high on Darian Mayo. You look in next class, you got Ari Watford and Amari Adams. Like you have Isaiah Campbell. You have a lot of bodies coming into this defensive line room, and for a guy like Zaire Patterson, who's been in the program for now, this is his 4th season now. It's he hasn't played. He didn't play much last year, and now it's getting further and further. Where you now have Peter Woods and Caden Story moving over into his position and clogging it up even more. It's kind of it's kind of, when are you gonna realize that, hey, this is it, almost. And things, he has eligibility, so I don't necessarily want to prescribe it that much that it's like, oh, he'll never be good, because we saw what Justin Mascall looked like in his last year. But the light bulb is, at a certain point, you can't keep waiting for the light bulb to come on. He's got to want to be able to be great,
Right.
Because he certainly had the talent coming out of high school. He was a top 150 player. But he hasn't had that focus, that drive, and that dedication to really want to be a great football player, and that's it's disappointing. So we'll see what maybe they'll sometimes all it takes is just one moment to realize, hey, this is it for me, and then that light bulb comes on. But I'm not holding out hope. So there's a lot of prove it in this defensive end room right now. And the move, I think, not only did Dabo moving Woods and Story over, for just practicability standpoint, but also to send a message to those guys, the Cade Denhoffs, especially Zaire Patterson. We talked about Jaheim Lawson. Armand Mason, they've talked about. I know he's injured, so unfortunately, but that room needs some guys to step up, because at the end of the day, it's like, well, man, Peter Woods, as great as he is, if he gets hurt,
who do we got?
What
TJ Parker? What if he gets hurt?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's and I think that's a good point, because if not now, then when? For guys like, and I'm not speaking disrespectfully about these players at all. It's just they came in with such high ceilings, such great potential in a Cade Denhoff, in a Zaire Patterson, Jaheim Lawson. Those guys, they have to develop, and hopefully, like you mentioned, this is kind of a kick in the butt for them. This is kind of a wake up call. Like, hey man, like, if not now, then when? Because you mentioned the young guys coming in, right? Adam Kasai, he's already on campus. He's already getting reps. Darian Mayo, he'll be here in the summer, and he'll be getting reps.
He's here.
Oh, he's here? I thought he was a summer enrollee.
Yeah, Darian Mayo he's a early enrollee, I believe.
Okay, cool. All right. I thought that's my bad. I thought he was a summer enrollee. But those guys are on campus right now. They're getting reps. So, if
I might be wrong about that. Let me check.
You're gonna get buried. My point is you're gonna get buried in a depth chart eventually, right? And at this point in time, you've been in the system for long enough. You should be able to figure it out, right? And I hope those guys can really have a breakthrough this spring.
You're right. I had them. I get them flipped all the time. I don't know why I do that.
Okay. So Darian Mill coming in the summer, right? So that's even more guys that are coming in that are going to be vying for that same playing time that you're trying to get. So I hope it's a wake up call for these guys, both because I hope they go on to have really good careers at Clemson, and two, because selfishly as a Clemson fan, I want us to have the best opportunity to win. And that is, the best opportunity for Clemson to win is to have quality depth behind a Peter Woods and a TJ Parker. Those guys can't be out there every single snap, right? There's got to be some semblance of a rotation, and we need those guys to step up. We need a Cade Denhoff to step up. We need a Zaire Patterson to step up. We need a Jaheim Lawson to step up. A Kasai, a Mayo. We need those guys to become quality depth because guess what? Injuries happen. Unfortunately, that's a part of football, and just having 2 guys to roll out there or 3 guys to roll out there is not the best situation to be in, especially in big time college football when you're 1 snap away from your backup now being your starter. So I hope that's the wake up call that these guys need to really get it going. From a motivation standpoint, from a just staring your own career standpoint, I hope they can get it together for both them and for the Clemson Tigers team as a whole.
Absolutely. And so, this is probably, this is the most important spot on defense, going into this year because, the staff has talked about wanting to be bigger. They want to be able to set the edge better in the run game. That's something that this team struggled with at times last year. And you saw, when you didn't maintain gap integrity, big run play. They didn't give up a ton of. They didn't give up. In 2022, it was the big passing plays that really killed them. And then this year it was the run play, and then not to the same degree, but still there were moments in every game where it's broke off a big run. The Miami game, they broke off a big run. North Carolina, and so you want to. That's not what you want to be as a defense. And, Wes Goodwin has talked about it. And that's just something that they can't afford to be. They can't be a team that, it's already, you want to make it tough for the opposing offense to, get a first down. But if they're, one big play, they've gotten 5, 6, 7 first downs just in one play. And so essentially, it's going to be important for this group for a lot of reasons. And, we haven't, another thing is we haven't had the pass rush necessarily, the pass rush has been good the last couple of years, but, you haven't generated the same amount of pressures and sacks, especially sacks that you used to be able to, like in tackles for loss, under Brent Venables, that was a staple of this defense. They led the country in sacks from from the 2012 to through Brent Venables last year. I believe Clemson was number 1 in total sacks, or maybe it was Pitt. That might have been a shorter time period. But I know through Venables' entire tenure, Clemson led the nation in sacks and so and tackles for loss. And so that's how you get off the field, is generating negative plays. And so if this group needs to be able to do that and also stop the run. And we need more than just TJ Parker, and we need more than even, Peter Woods moving in. You still need more than that because injuries happen. They can't play it, or even just one of them gets tired. And it's like, I gotta sit out for a series.
Yeah.
Can you put somebody in? Can Caden Story come in and give you that? Or can it be one of your veterans? AJ Hoffler. He's not a veteran, but AJ Hoffler's another young guy. Cade Denhoff, Zaire Patterson, can you get those guys to come in and give you quality snaps? And so it's going to be interesting to hear kind of how that whole position battle and sort of the competition at that position is kind of playing out.
Yeah, and that's good. That's going to be one of the big question marks for spring is, can we develop the quality depth behind the guys that are going to run out there first, because that's going to be very important for how good this Clemson defense is going to be in 2024. And I think they got a chance to be really good, but that depth is going to be super important as the season goes on. And, everybody knows the grind of a season. So, we'll see how it looks as spring goes on. Hopefully we start to hear some good returns and, some positive things coming out of particularly that position group, but also out of other ones that we'll talk about as spring goes on. Offensive line is going to be a big thing and all that kind of stuff. So lots to still dissect as spring practice goes on. And as we hear stuff from media members and as we hear stuff from players and coaches via interviews and things like that, hopefully we can start to deduce some things that are going on that we can't see with our own eyes because we're fans and we don't have the privilege of watching spring practice, unfortunately. I would love to, but apparently we're not allowed to. I don't know why. It is what it is, though.
Yeah.
But
I think that's well said. I'm just it's kind of unfamiliar territory because that's just not a position that Clemson has had traditionally a ton of question marks at.
Yep.
So uncharted waters. We'll see.
Uncharted waters. I mean, it seemed like for years we were just rolling out dude after dude at defensive end and defensive tackle. I mean, all along the defensive line, and in recent years, we've gotten pretty thin at that defensive end position. We don't have quite the name or the star power out there that we used to. So let's see if we can develop that, and let's see how Peter Woods looks. I expect him to be really, really good out there, if not great. So him starting opposite of TJ Parker will probably be must-see TV, and can't wait to watch it. Can't wait to watch it. Think it's going to work out well for the Tigers, and time will tell. Time will tell if we are correct. But let's go ahead and transition into our next topic. We got a couple more here, and then we're going to turn the show over to the listeners. So the next topic we're going to talk about tonight is the early spring returns. And this could be, the young guys that we're just getting a fresh look at. This can be some of the older guys. I think we'll cover a spectrum of it as we go through this segment, and we can mention different guys. You can go through guys that you want to talk about, Jordan. But some of the things that I've heard on early returns. Now, granted, we're only 2 practices in. Media has only watched a small, very small portion of one practice. So we're hearing very limited stuff, but we are seeing some videos. We are hearing some things from certain media members on things that they saw. One of the big things out of the early spring returns, I think, is the kicking game. The kicking game looks alive and well. Now, granted, they're not getting any live work. They're just kicking balls through goalposts. But, it's no secret that we have 2 kickers that can absolutely bomb the ball. Robert Gunn can absolutely kick it out of the stadium. And apparently Nolan Hoosier can absolutely do the same thing. So what I like about that is because of Robert Gunn's struggles last season, hopefully Nolan Hoosier can come in and really push him. And one of those dudes can emerge as the consistent field goal kicker that we are going to need to win games this season. It greatly affected us last season. It's something that we got to clean up. And now we have 2 highly recruited kickers on the roster currently. One of them got to pan out, right? At least we hope so. And then I hearing a lot of things from the wide receivers. Everybody loves talking about the wide receivers. So, of course, they're getting a lot of love out of the early returns for spring. And some of the 2 biggest names you're kind of hearing is Adam Randall. He's looking amazing on some video clips that I'm watching of Adam Randall. He looks fast. He looks confident. He looks like he's getting a lot closer to the Adam Randall that we used to talk about a couple years ago before he had 2 surgeries on his knees and all that kind of stuff kind of happened to him and kind of hindered his career for quite a bit. Looks like he's getting back to the old Adam Randall that, kind of walked on campus, the guy that Clemson recruited, which is an awesome thing for the Clemson Tigers. We need a guy like Adam Randall to be what we recruited him to be. That would be a game changer for this Clemson offense. So excited to hear about that early return for spring. And then Brian Wesco, new kid on the block, looking great already. Reports from media members says that, he's already starting to look more filled out with his frame. He's already put on quite a bit of weight. Quick twitch guy, gets out of his breaks fast. Like I said, has already put on the muscle, looks as advertised so far, which is to be expected. We've talked about both Brian Wesco and TJ Moore. TJ Moore is a summer enrollee, so we won't see him until fall camp. But early returns on Brian Wesco are as advertised, man, and couldn't be more excited. What are you hearing about the early returns from spring practice so far?
Well, yeah, just to touch on the two guys you mentioned. Yeah, Adam Randall obviously is already kind of stealing the show a little bit. With just some of the highlight plays, and that's good to see. Listen, you and I have kind of taken the approach with a lot of the, especially with the offense in general, of wait and see. We'll believe it when we see it, type of
Yep.
thing. And I don't think that's I don't think we're taking that a different approach with Adam Randall.
No.
At the end of the day, he still has to do it on the field.
Right.
But man, it's better to see it than not.
Right.
That's for sure. Even in practice, if he wasn't making plays in practice, it's one thing to make plays in practice and then it doesn't translate to the field. But if he's not making plays in practice, you got no reason to believe that he's going to do anything on the field. So it's better
Absolutely.
that he's having that success in practice than not. And so that's at least a start. So I that's exciting because we know he has all the physical ability in the world. And I think the more he gets removed from that injury, I think is those two injuries. I think the better. I mean, and he played with a broken hand last year, and so it's the guys had it rough. And so I think, this spring is pivotal for him just to get that confidence back. Now that he's not dealing with something, whether it's his knee, trusting his knee again or dealing with the hand. Because I thought, towards the end of last year, he started to make those plays and he started to look more comfortable. I thought he made some really tough catches in the bowl game. So once he, I think if he can take that and transition it into, all right, now I'm the guy, and he just seizes that job, that can only spell good things for this offense.
Absolutely.
So, I don't want to say, oh man, Adam Randall's back. The Adam Randall we thought we were getting is here and here to stay. But it's better that he's making those plays, especially early, than not. And that. And people in the chat talking about that one-handed catch he made. Yeah, that was pretty impressive. And you saw the ability in the hands. And that was against Avion Terrell, who's going to be one of your better defensive backs next year. And so it's a good sign at least that you're going to be pretty good. And one thing I will say is those drills are always kind of tailored to the wide receiver because they got the DB's got the boxing gloves on, so they can't grab. And it's a good drill for them to kind of stay in phase and learn how to not grab and all of that. But that's still a tough play. And Chris Vizina threw the ball. So it was a pretty well placed ball. I mean, it was where only Adam Randall could get it. We'll talk about kind of him as well. So it was good to see Adam Randall, making plays early. And then you mentioned Bryant Wesco. Yeah, he's twitched up, man. He's really
that dude.
And so he's still he's put on some weight. He's still wiry, but that's kind of he's no different than previous Clemson wide receivers that have come in. T. Higgins was a beanstalk coming in. Dabo talked about Nuke Hopkins. He was really skinny coming in. Obviously he developed into a pretty physically impressive receiver, but he did not come in that way. I think Paul Strelo over at Tiger Illustrated, he mentioned he didn't come in like Sammy Watkins did, where Sammy came in and you could just, oh my God, we don't have anybody like him. Kind of how I feel how TJ Moore is going to come in the summer. The parallels are really similar. So it's kind of, but you see the physical ability, the tools. He's twitched up and he's comes from a really good school, Midlothian, and he's clearly well coached, and so he understands the game as well. So I'm really excited to see him kind of take full advantage of getting in early this spring and kind of seeing how much he physically matures as we continue in the spring. And then the guy we didn't talk about that I just wanted to mention, who also looks as advertised, is none other than 5-star linebacker Sammy Brown. Man, he's a guy that came in as like, wow, we don't have anybody that looks like him.
Yeah.
He's just
If,
very good, very impressive.
if he
He's going to
if
be tough
he
to off the field.
yeah, if he learns the defense, he's getting on the field.
Oh yeah,
He's 100% playing and being a real contributor. That dude is, as advertised, man, just a physical freak, man. Like he's just, everything you would want in a linebacker. His drive, his aggressiveness, his just athletic ability. Everybody knows what he did in high school as both a linebacker and a running back. Pretty impressive stats for a running back as well in high school. So the athleticism's there, the versatility's there. And like I said, if he can learn the defense, which as we've already mentioned in previous episodes, there's a lot to learn for a Clemson linebacker. The Clemson defense tends to put a lot of responsibilities on their linebacking core, and they really have to understand all the concepts well and really know the defense through and through. So physically, he's ready right now. We'll see if he gets there as they start the install and everything gets in place and how quickly he picks that stuff up. That will tell how much playing time he gets. But he's getting playing time this season. Ain't no doubt about that.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I will say, one of the good things is, maybe when Brent Venables was coach, the defense was it for a true freshman linebacker. The chances of you getting on the field was pretty much.
Yeah,
it's pretty much slim to none, and it's a different way of doing it. But I think what Wes has done really well is kind of simplified something. The defense isn't like, it still isn't simple, but he certainly made things a lot more streamlined. And so I think he did that in an effort to make sure he could get his best guys on the field, because you can't not put a guy like an athlete like Sammy Brown out there and just you kind of keep him on the bench. Like he has to play, especially now that Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is gone and there's kind of a hole left there. And you have experienced guys coming back like Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz, but you don't really know what you have behind them yet. So he's got to get on the field. And so I think that's one of the good things, and one of the things that I think points to Sammy Brown playing earlier than maybe he would have if he had come in just 5 years ago. So
yeah,
that's the good thing.
And another thing, I think it'd be interesting to see how Clemson's defense plays it. Right? Are they going to play that kind of 4-2-5 type look that they played a lot last season, or are they going to go with the 3 linebacker set with a true Mike, Will, and Sam linebackers? Right? And I think that'll dictate how much playing time he can get as well. So it'll kind of depend on, and I'm sure Wes Goodwin will base that off of personnel and things like that. So that'll be another interesting thing to see how Clemson plays it. But I'm with you. You can't not put a guy like Sammy Brown on the field. I mean, when he comes in like that, as advertised, it's just as physically ready as he is. I mean, you just got to give him some opportunities out there, and you make some good points about Wes Goodwin come in and simplifying the defense. It's not quite as daunting for the linebackers as it maybe would have been had there been a Brent Venables still on the sideline, which I would still take Brent Venables on the sideline. But,
100%. It's just a different way of doing things.
Yeah, different philosophies. Yeah.
And that's you're seeing Wes Goodwin. I think people that expected him to come in and be a Brent Venables clone just because he worked under him. No, Wes Goodwin has his own ideas and thoughts and kind of philosophies of how he wants his defense to look. And you're seeing that identity coming to fruition, especially last year. I mean, you saw the jumps they took. And so you have to feel good about the talent they're bringing in. And, Sammy Brown is that's certainly the headliner, and he's a guy he's going to be tough to keep off the field.
Yeah, for sure. He will certainly be tough to keep off the field. And I'm certain they will not be able to keep him off the field very much. It'll just be how much playing time he gets. But he will be on the field in some capacity for a lot of next season, barring injury or anything unfortunate like that. But let's go ahead, Jordan, and we will transition to our last topic of the night. And that's going to be our segment that we dubbed a couple episodes ago, and that is the all-around college football segment. And what this is, for those of you that aren't familiar with it yet, it's sort of a rapid fire segment that me and Jordan do. We look up some stories and some interesting things that are going around college football, and we do a rapid fire type thing and give our quick thoughts about it and then move on to the next thing. So we got a few things to talk about tonight in the all around college football segment. And I think first up, we'll talk about the NCAA possibly adding a June signing period, Jordan. Now, this is something that coaches Dabo Swinney has talked about for a very long time, about how the transfer portal is affecting high school recruiting in a very negative manner and limiting the opportunities for young high school kids to get spots on major college football rosters, right?
Yep.
And no one that has watched college football in the past 3 to 4 years can say that that's not the case. So what are your thoughts on the possibility of this June signing period becoming a thing? Do you think it will happen? And do you want it to happen?
I think it's a realistic possibility. And from what has come out about those discussions, there seems to be some support for it. And listen, from a Clemson perspective, I think this would be a great thing. Especially with how the shift in how Clemson's recruiting philosophy has changed. Could you? I think having that June signing day. I mean, that's like giving it. Dabo is certainly probably chomping at the bit for sure. I think he would certainly be one of those guys in support. Like, could you imagine just like, you have your May 31st, visit. Obviously it wouldn't be implemented this year, but you have your May 31st visit weekend, and Clemson these past couple of years they typically get a string of commitments after that, and the bulk of their class is created from that weekend. And then you can get them locked in at the end of the month, like
immediately.
That one of the things Clemson has done a really good job at when the guys commit, they tend to stay committed. Obviously, that's for a reason, and the rules that are in place for Clemson commits. But it hasn't been foolproof. We've talked about it. The IMG kids back in the 22 class. Ray Joseph a couple cycles ago. It's not foolproof. Corey Foreman, if you guys remember that name, Tiger tattoo and everything. So it hasn't been foolproof, especially in recent years. So having a June, from a Clemson perspective, having a June signing period would just be pretty magical for Clemson. It would be perfect because they get the guys in, for that weekend, they get their string of commitments and then lock them in, and it gives. So from a Clemson perspective, it's really it gives the staff more peace of mind. Obviously, they can still be released from their NIL and stuff like that, but it's certainly a lot more difficult and a lot less likely that you're going to lose a guy. And then, from just a greater college football standpoint, I mean, as you mentioned, these high school recruits, I mean, they have certainly seen it hasn't been the 5-star blue chip prospects that have suffered from, the transfer portal so much as the, maybe the low 3-star that had a really strong senior year. There's tons of kids that are pretty much off college radars for their first 2-3 years of high school, and then they have a phenomenal junior year or senior year and get noticed. They show up to these camps and they're like, it used to happen all the time, and kids would go to these camps and leave with like 25 Power 5 offers. But that's not happening anymore because most schools are reserving spots for potential transfer additions and stuff like that. And so while it's not hurting the 5-star, blue chip talent that everybody wants, it is affecting a lot of these high school kids that have, phenomenal, they're late bloomers or they were kind of flew under the radar, and, they have a legitimate shot and opportunity to play at a major
right.
a major school, and all of a sudden that's not a possibility for them anymore. And so this does a lot of good things, and it certainly speeds up the calendar again. But at this point, that's kind of the recruiting calendar. But at this point, that's kind of where we are already, because a lot of teams are trying to lock down visits and get
Yeah.
guys in and really build their class before they get into the season, because that December that race to that December signing day is ruthless. And with NIL, coupling that with NIL and all the trappings and enticements that are going on right now, that makes it even more difficult to hold together a class of commitments and keeping them as commitments and eventually signing them. I think it certainly puts more pressure from a recruiting standpoint, but it helps the kids, and it kind of, if you're smart about it, it can help the schools as well, ensure that they're not, losing players from their class. So, I'd be for it. Certainly from Clemson's perspective, I'd be for it.
Yeah, I think it works perfectly for a place like Clemson, but I think it works overall for college football in general. I mean, are you going to tell me that a June signing day wouldn't be better than trying to sign majority of your class in the middle of December?
Yeah.
When you're going to be preparing for now that we're in the 12-team playoff, when you're preparing for playoff games,
yeah,
when you're doing all this sort of stuff, right? You're recruiting, you're preparing for playoff games, you're trying to get your national signing day all locked up, and that's a lot of stuff to deal with, right? So there's no way it's not better to have that over the summer when you're not playing football games. Like, does it condense the schedule? Does it speed it up? Yeah, but it's also in a time where you're not preparing for football games. So, I think it would work out better for everybody. It would certainly work out better for high school kids and give them a little bit more opportunities, the 3 stars and those guys that you're talking about. This stuff is never going to affect the blue chip talent in high school.
No.
It's never going to affect those guys. Just like the transfer portal, these blue chip players that go into the transfer portal, they never get left in the transfer portal. But there's thousands of players that do get left in the transfer portal because they were fed bad information, and now they have no college football home to go to and to play for because they got fed bad information by people, right?
Yep.
So, but that's the stuff that no one ever wants to talk about. They never want to talk about the negatives to these things, right? Like, nothing's ever all good or all bad, right? So there's negative things that have happened since the transfer portal has been a thing. And I'm not talking from a Clemson standpoint because we hate the portal and yada, yada, yada. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm genuinely talking about from players that have gone in the portal thinking that they have a landing spot and then just getting stuck in the portal and they end up without a college football home. Like, that's crazy. And no one talks about it in college football. No one talks about those 3 stars in high school that don't get opportunities anymore like they would have before. So I think this would be a good solution to try to alleviate at least some of that. It's never going to be all the way back to the way that it was about, you mentioned, these like low 3 stars going to camps and impressing and then suddenly coming out with, 10, 15, 20 offers. The days of that are probably in the past for the most part. But I think this would alleviate at least some of it and give those high school players at least a little bit more opportunity than they're currently getting in the model that we have in college football right now. And I think it'd be better for the coaching staffs and people playing in the month of December, your conference championship games, your playoff games, all that stuff that's going to be crowded up into the month of December. Get that early signing period out of there, man. Get it to a different spot on the calendar, and I'm fine with June if that's what they land on. So hopefully that's the case. But moving right along to our next topic, the NCAA versus Tennessee. This is an interesting thing that has been going around and something that greatly affects all of college football, not just Tennessee. Tennessee was the university associated with its lawsuit, and the state of Tennessee kind of went to their defense. So a federal judge last Friday granted a junction um, that applies until the court case plays out within the court system. So basically, it covers the entire country and basically deems every NCAA rule on NIL unenforceable. They cannot enforce their own rules on NIL, not just for Tennessee, but anywhere in the country. So the NCAA has zero power to enforce any of their NIL rules. So it truly is the wild, wild west out here when it comes to NIL. You could literally, as a school right now, do anything you want as far as NIL goes, and the NCAA can't do a thing about it. What are your thoughts on that? That ruling that federal judge, that injunction that federal judge kind of issued, and what do you think, if any, ramifications that will happen throughout college football based on this ruling?
Well, I don't think it's going to change anything from happening that wasn't already happening. That's for sure. But it is another step in the direction of, eventually we have to address, this player compensation model, and the NCAA, as it's currently constructed, they can't legally enforce any of it, and it's not going to hold up in court. And so, one thing that really jumped out was, these NIL firms and collectives and all of that, they can, they're allowed to contact high school players. That was something that they mentioned. So, that's, before that was a rule that was, that was certainly a rule that would get you in trouble and all of that. But now, and not that it didn't, wasn't already happening, but now it's there's nothing the NCAA can do it, and it can be blatant and out in the open now. Mm-hmm. And so, that's just kind of another step in the direction of eventually we're going to have to figure out some sort of revenue sharing model and compensate these players, because there's no way for the NCAA to enforce their amateurism model. As it's currently constructed. And so, it's another kind of domino in that sort of progression. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, big blow to the NCAA. Essentially, they can't enforce any rule that they have on the books as it pertains to NIL. We've seen states, we talked about it a couple shows ago, about South Carolina revising their NIL policy and revising that bill that they passed back in 2018 to allow the universities within South Carolina to basically broker deals for their players, to go seek out and get their players deals, and they can be directly involved in those deals now in the state of South Carolina. So this just kind of furthers that from a national standpoint, applies to the entire country. I'm with you. I don't think it changes anything that was already going, that there's nothing that's going to start happening with NIL that wasn't already happening before. I completely agree with that. I mean, it's another example of the NCAA is obsolete. All these fights that they've been putting in are, there's just no point to them anymore. I don't even see a point for them fighting this in court. They're not going to win. There's a 0% chance of them winning any of this stuff. So they might as well leave it alone and save the little bit of money they got left. And start.
I know their lawyers are laughing to the bank right now.
Yeah, their lawyers are like,
I'll take an ass beating in these court cases. I'll argue. I'll argue that the sky is yellow for you if I have to. I'll say what grass is blue. Whatever you want me to say, as long as you keep paying me. So
whatever.
That's kind of what that's what they're doing now.
As long as you keep paying this $2,000 an hour or whatever ridiculous fee they're paying their lawyers, but. At the end of the day, the NCAA is obsolete. They might want to start saving some of that money because they might be completely done with college football in short order. There's big changes coming into college football. Everybody's talking about it, what the changes are going to look like, and what college football ends up being. None of us really know. But the one thing we do know is the changes are not done. And there's significantly more changes and possibly bigger changes on the horizon in the near future. So that's pretty crazy. One of the quick things that I wanted to mention after that, just because I find it humorous, Ohio State self-reports some ridiculous low-level violations to the NCAA. What are you doing, like, at this point? Like, we just got finished talking about how the NCAA basically can't enforce anything. And then here comes Ohio State. They're like, we used a blocking pad when we weren't supposed to. And
Hey,
We
you know,
we
it's one of
call
those things.
we tampered with we tampered with players in the SEC to get them to Ohio State. Guess what, Ohio State? Everybody knew that.
Yeah.
We knew exactly how you got those players to come to Ohio State. You called them and offered them a bunch of money. Like everyone already knows that. Like, what are you doing?
Well, you know, it's one of the, you know, every school, you know, does that. Well, they have a, you know, where they self-report, you know, because, you know, every school has an NCAA compliance office,
I
and so
know.
they log all of the, you know, if they do something kind of that's even if it's a level 2 violation, um, you know, they report, you know, they record it, and so they put it and compile it in this little thing, and they send it off to the NCAA and say, hey, look, you know, that thing you told us not to do, we accidentally did it. We're sorry, and we're just letting you know that we did it because we're honest, good people that don't do anything wrong.
Yeah, of course we don't. We would never.
So and so the NCAA be like, okay, you'll get off this time, but try not to do it again.
Yeah,
You know,
if
it's one
you
of those
do it
things.
again, we might have to do something. It's
It's
just
like a
like I'm
very
not.
lenient parent that
Yeah,
doesn't want to discipline their children in any sort of
it's
fashion,
like
but they're like,
yeah,
I suggect not doing that, and
yeah,
then the kid is like, oh, I accidentally broke my toy or whatever, and they're like, oh, you got to be more careful, try not to do it again.
yeah.
But
It's like that
it's never
parent.
anything serious.
It's like that parent that counts to three, but when they get to three, nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
It's just like what are we doing? It's
Yeah.
and I'm not even really like picking on Ohio State for reporting, but like self-reporting at this point, just for any university, just seems like performative at this point. Like
I mean,
the,
that's
the,
what it's
the
always been.
NCAA can't do anything. Like, what are they
No.
gonna do? What are they gonna do? Like, I truly believe in college football right now, you could literally do anything. What is the NCAA gonna do to anyone at this point? They literally every time they try, you see what happens. They get obliterated in court. I mean, it's just it's blow after blow, and they're crumbling right before our very eyes. I don't feel bad for them, by the way. They created this themselves. If they would have made changes years ago, by allowing players to, I don't know, have a freaking YouTube channel, maybe some of this stuff wouldn't be happening right now. But they were so stubborn and so ridiculous with their amateurism and all that nonsense. And so here we are. Thanks, NCAA. You freaking ruin everything. And I'm glad you're getting embarrassed on a national scale, because even if you could enforce anything, you would do it all the wrong way, because that's what you always do.
Yeah.
But moving right along to our next thing, I ran across an article as I was looking stuff up for the show by CBS, and they were talking about, in the Senior Bowl, right? They use the helmet communication between coach and player. So apparently, the NCAA college football is considering adopting those at some point in time. Would you be in favor of college football going to the headsets and the helmets for the quarterbacks and the coaches? What do you think about that? Do you think it's a possibility or even feasible on a college football scale when you're thinking about all the teams involved? Like, of course, the people at the top could make it happen, no problem. But what are your thoughts on it? And do you think it'll ever actually come to fruition, I guess, in college football?
Well, I do know that the ACC has already approved like a limited, like I think a one-way coach to player communication devices for this season.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I think that's something that's coming soon. It's college football has been kind of unique for a long time because the NFL has been doing, the headsets and communicate for forever. Like they haven't been using signs and ages and stuff. But, college football has always been quirky and they just kind of never adopted that and, kept it against the rules and all that. And so, with it always takes one person to ruin it for everybody else, as you know. So the Michigan thing, it's something that the NCAA they just don't want to let it happen again. And it's something they can't just we'll punish Michigan but not do anything about it.
Right.
they aren't really going to. Nothing's really been done to Michigan either. So there's
Last I checked, they played in the college football playoff and won a
right.
national title. So I think they're doing okay. I don't think they care.
To curb that, they had to take some sort of, they have to take some sort of measure. Like that's kind of what they're going to think. And so, yeah, I definitely think that's something that's coming in the near future. And, I'm not against it necessarily, but, as Jeremiah said, the hand signs and boards, it was fun, Clemson holding up the laptop for Dave Doran when they were playing NC State and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was funny.
There are some creative, and that's just one example, but teams got really creative with their signs and stuff like that. And it's just kind of a unique part of college football that unfortunately we're probably going to be losing pretty soon.
Yeah, it's going to go away. And I'm convinced that like 90% of the signs that they held up meant absolutely nothing. Like
they do have dummy signs. Like, that is something that they do. They have it's like Clemson's is pretty elaborate. Like I know some people that have worked and been on the sidelines, and it's a pretty coordinated operation. Let's just say as far as calling plays and get it, like they have like a million different combinations of signs they use, and obviously if you're smart, you change them up every year. And then they have dummy signs and signs that mean absolutely nothing, and signs that actually tell you the play call, and they'll switch them up. And it could one sign could be a dummy sign one play, and then it's an actual signal the next. It's pretty it's a lot of fun, just kind of how and teams just have creative ways, whether they use music or not mute, but movie references or pictures or all sorts of pop culture references. It's part of what
really
makes
cool.
college football unique. So
yeah, it's really cool. Unfortunately, we're probably going to lose that completely here in the next several years. But it is what it is. College football is in complete flux right now. It's everything that we know about it is changing and will change in the future. But hopefully we end up in a good spot. And it all works out. It's kind of the train's already heading down the tracks at this point in time. There's no going back on most of this stuff that's happening in college football now. So just buckle up. We're in for the ride. The roller coaster has left the station. So we're just along for the ride at this point. A couple more things, and then we'll turn it over to the comment section. The FSU court case. I know FSU is loud and bold when talking about the ACC, and they filed a suit in Florida, and the ACC has filed a suit in North Carolina, and the ESPN chimed in on it, and all this stuff surrounding it. How do you see this thing? Do you think they settle outside of court for a predetermined amount of money? How do you think this thing plays out? I know there's people out there trying to guess the timeline of this type of stuff and saying that, this timeline or that timeline. Just quick thoughts on it, and then we'll move on.
It's kind of just the same old at this point. It's kind of everyone's the whole world's watching with intrigue. It's one of those things that everybody's going to have eyes on and kind of see how it plays out. I think eventually we're going to have some sort of resolution to this. There's been talks of eventually getting Florida State reaching a deal with the ACC to kind of maybe potentially negotiate the buyout down, and kind of settle it before it gets. I know they have a hearing in March. March what I don't remember the exact date, 21st or something like that. But I'm not I'm not a legal expert, and I don't know all the legal language and intricacies of that whole lawsuit. But I do think If I had to guess, I think Florida State will be out. I don't have a timeline, but I think eventually they will be out of the conference one way or the other. So
Yeah.
that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. Obviously, the big question from a Clemson perspective is what is Clemson's plan of action, and kind of how are they going to navigate all this, because they certainly have their reasons, and they certainly have been working to find ways to kind of evaluate how they could potentially get out of the ACC. So there's going to be a lot riding on this, and we'll see kind of how it plays out. But I don't have much more than that. I don't know and I've kind of been tuning it out at this point.
Yeah.
Because it's just, I want to talk about football, and between this and the college football playoff expansion and all of that, it's been these last couple of years have been pretty, the off season has been pretty rough, because it's like, oh man, it's fun to talk about for the first week or so after, when something happens, but then it's like, oh man, this is all we're talking about.
Yeah, it's exhausting at a certain point. But we'll see how it works out. I'm sure Florida State is going to get out at some point. They will stop at nothing until they are out of the ACC. What that looks like, I don't know. Probably a pretty significant dollar amount, I would assume, if they settle outside of court, or still a significant dollar amount if you drag it through court. Either way, but they will end up out of the ACC. What that means for the rest of the ACC and Clemson, does that open up the floodgates in the ACC and cause a mass exodus? Who knows? To be determined. We'll be here if it happens. And I'm sure we'll be talking about it. So moving on to our last topic of the night before we turn it over to the comment section. So go ahead and, guys, start thinking about your questions. Start thinking about your comments that you want us to respond to. Get them into the chat. If you want to use the super chat feature to get your comment for sure read on the show, go ahead and do that. But the last topic we'll talk about before we turn it over to all of our fine folks in the comment section is the NFL Combine. We got 6 Tigers looking to show their skills to all the pro scouts out there prior to the NFL draft. And that is Will Shipley, Xavier Thomas, Tyler Davis, Ruka Roro, and Jeremiah Trotter and Nate Wiggins. Those are the individuals that will be competing in the NFL Combine. I know you told me earlier before we came on the show that you've kind of been keeping an eye on it while you were, busy doing things today. So what have you seen so far from our Tigers? How are they looking in the NFL Combine so far? And, any standout things that have happened so far?
Yeah, so it was defensive linemen and linebackers today. So the first day. So we've seen the 3 defensive linemen for Clemson that are in this event, and then the linebackers were tonight as well. We don't have a full. We don't know everything yet, and we don't. Obviously Nate Wiggins and oh my goodness, Nate Wiggins and who am I forgetting? Because all the defensive linemen have gone tonight.
The D lineman, Tyler Davis, Ruka Roro.
Okay, so Tyler, they've all gone. All the defense, Xavier Thomas, they've all gone. Who am I not? There's a 6th.
Wiggins, Trotter, Rook, Tyler Davis, XT, and Shipley.
Yeah, I don't. Man, sorry, Will Shipley erasure. I'm sorry. How did I forget Will? So Nate and Will still have to go, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. will not be. He is not running or doing the broad jump tonight. So he's gonna do a full workout at Pro Day.
Cool.
I don't know the reasons behind it. Maybe it's an injury. I'm not really sure, so I couldn't tell you. But from what I saw from the defensive lineman, I think the standout was most definitely Ruka Roro. I think he did the most to help his draft stock tonight. today. Ran 4.89 40. I mean, a guy his size, that's pretty incredible. I think that was good for fourth or fifth among defensive tackles. He was second in the broad jump. I don't have his numbers pulled up in front of me, but he was like top 5 in basically everything. Just stud, physical specimen, and a guy that he's had a lot of intrigue and kind of gotten a lot of recent love from draft stock, draft analysts, GM, scouts. He's interesting, and so he had a really good opportunity today to kind of the athleticism he showed on tape to actually show it in a workout setting, and he certainly did. So was really happy to see him kind of show out. I think he's a guy that could potentially play his way, work his way into maybe early second round, for maybe late first round type guy. He certainly looked really, really good. I thought Tyler Davis did really well. He ran a 5.02. I think that was his official 40 time. He didn't obviously he wasn't doing the things that Rook was doing, but I thought he had a really good what they call the wave drill, where they kind of direct you side to side, back and forth. You start from a down, your down position, and then you kind of pop up, and they kind of do it to show your lateral movement and agility and suddenness and your change of direction. I thought he did really good on that, and so thought he had a pretty solid performance. And XT, I hate it for him because he actually got injured during his 40 time, but ran a 4.63, which was still good for fourth among edge rushers. And he was talking about on Twitter how he's like, man, I'm even faster than that. And so he said he didn't get, it wasn't hurt, but he cramped up. So he's all good. So he'll run again, and he'll work out again at Clemson's Pro Day. But I thought he had a really strong performance as well. Those three guys, they had pretty nice performances. But Rook was most definitely the standout for sure. He kind of showed some of that high end ability that we kind of knew he had. He's just a guy that hasn't played a ton of football. He didn't start playing football until his junior year of high school, and so that's kind of what has scouts kind of salivating, because it's like, man, once we get him here and we get him with our coaches, what could we possibly turn him into? So I certainly think Rook was he was one of the standouts today, just overall, not just among the three Clemson players, but just he was one of the standouts of the defensive lineman today. So that was cool to see.
That's awesome, man. Wish all those dudes well. Hope they have great workouts. Hope the senior day at Clemson goes well, and all their workouts go extremely well. I'm rooting for every single one of those dudes. Love to see the Tigers go to the NFL, have long, successful careers, because one, it does great things for the brand, and two, it's really nice to see these dudes, leave a place like Clemson and go have a lot of success in the NFL, because there's a very, very small percentage of college athletes that get to do that. 95, 98, whatever the percentage is of college athletes don't even really get a shot. So the fact that we got 6 Clemson Tigers at the NFL Combine, I hope they all get drafted. I hope they all get drafted high and have long careers. Wishing them well, and can't wait to watch them play in the NFL. But Jordan, we are already approaching an hour and 50 minutes. So I think it's time that we quickly turn it over to the comment section and let them get some questions in before we get out of here tonight. A little bit of a longer show tonight. I knew it would be, guys, just because of, spring practice starting. We had a lot to talk about with injuries and all of that kind of stuff. But I appreciate everybody sticking around for the first hour and 47 minutes of this show. It's absolutely amazing. Make sure you hit that like button while you're in here. Go ahead and get your comments into the live chat. We'll chop it up with you guys for a bit. see what you guys are talking about tonight, and then we'll get out of here. We'll see you next Thursday right here at 7 p.m. If you're watching on the rewatch, make sure you check out our timestamps. You can go and see all the various topics that we covered tonight and kind of skip around and watch what you want to watch and don't watch what you don't want to watch. But Jordan, let's see what they're talking about in the comment section.
Let's do it. David asked about Wiggins' 40 time. Obviously, he hasn't run yet, but I did want to mention that he said in the preliminary draft interviews that the highest time, the best time that he's been clocked in preparation for it was a 4.27.
4.27, huh?
Yeah.
Woo! All right.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys,
he's fast, man.
Yeah, he's really, really fast. And I put a tweet out that I said, for most players when they say stuff like this, it's like, oh, we'll see. But yeah, man, that's the speed shows up on tape, and he's one of the fastest players I can remember. Playing at Clemson, so I would not surprise me. It would not surprise me if he ran a sub 4.3. And even then, if he runs as a defensive back with of his caliber, you really only need, especially with his coverage skills, you really only need a 4 to run like a 4.4 in the 4.4s for scouts to be like, okay, he's got verified speed, but he's faster than that. Yeah, so I would be surprised if he was. I would be surprised if he was anything slower than the 4.3 range. That's for sure. Yeah. And I think that could be and that might be a low end time. And so if he runs like a 4.27, 4.28, 4.2, those are some of the fastest times in combine history. He would be, I don't know if he would make the top 10, but he'd be in the top 20 for sure.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah. So he's fast. I expect him to run a really, really strong time tomorrow. Let's see. Almighty Fan says, thanks for showing so much love in here to a FSU fan. Catch y'all later. Yeah, man. Otherwise known as Insane Mob. Good to have you. He's been our resident FSU fan since he's been around since the at least before the Florida State game this year. He's been around a long time. So
appreciate you sticking around, man. Love to have other fan bases in here.
Absolutely. He's been around a while. So good to have you, man. David also asked, how did Myles Murphy do in the NFL? Well, his career is far from over, but, he had a limited, rookie season. He's kind of spent a lot of the year as the backup. I mean, the Bengals have really good defense, edge rushers. So, that was kind of to be expected. But he flashed some at times. So, we'll kind of see how it goes. He's with Marion Hobby. Obviously, Clemson fans know that name, former defensive end coach at Clemson. And so obviously he knows, obviously didn't coach Myles, but obviously that Clemson connection certainly helps more than it hurts. So, Myles Murphy was always a guy I saw I didn't expect him to come in and dominate right away. It was going to take him some time to kind of figure out, but the physical tools are there. And I think he showed it at times last year. So we'll see kind of what he looks like heading into his second season. Jeremiah's Payne asked, do y'all think Dabo lets Garrett get more freedom in the offense in year 2? I think the question is kind of flawed because I don't think it's Dabo holding, Garrett back as far as what the offense was able to do last year. It was the personnel, the guys, what you were working with from a quarterback standpoint, offensive line standpoint, especially, and just guys not, flat out, not doing the easy, what's supposed to be the easy stuff, right? When you can't run your basic fundamental stuff, you can't build anything off of it. And you can't run those the explosive plays and create the same kind of be kind of creative like you want to, because you don't have the trust in your guys like you would want to. So I certainly think it's not been Dabo was hindering Garrett's freedom with the offense last year. I think it was the personnel limiting Garrett's freedom with the offense and just the lack of execution. And that falls on Garrett because at least to some degree, because it's his offense. He's the coach. It's part of your job is to make sure these guys are ready to play and are doing what you ask. So that's. It's not just. I think what Clemson fans, to a degree, when we've talked about this, we've kind of sort of eschewed blame from Garrett Riley because he was the shiny new toy, the shiny new hire, and he's supposed to come in and save the offense. But it's not. Obviously, it wasn't that simple, and obviously things didn't go how we wanted to. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons why it didn't work out that are beyond Garrett Riley's control. I mean, these aren't guys he recruited. It's not a quarterback he recruited, offensive line, and it's a new system. But some responsibility still has to fall on him. And I think this is a big year for him. Not just his players, but it's a big year for him. Because he's still a young coach and has aspirations, I'm sure. And, things, I certainly don't think that, last year was how he envisioned his first year at Clemson going. So
certainly not. I think everybody envisioned it to go quite a bit differently, but this is a popular narrative that's out there that Dabo Swinney kind of runs the offense, and Garrett Riley has to operate within the limits of what Dabo Swinney tells him to do. And I know it's a popular narrative out there. I just don't buy into it at all. I don't think you hire a guy like Garrett Riley and then handcuff him in your offensive scheme, right? And frankly, I don't think a guy like Garrett Riley would come to Clemson just to be handcuffed and to run Clemson's offense, right?
If I came in, if a future Hall of Fame coach called me and said, "Hey, listen, I want you to come. I want you to come and you're the breath of fresh air that we need, and I want you to come fix this offense." And then I come in and it says, "Here's what you're going to run," and the head coach says, "Here's what you're going to run. You're going to do this, this, and this, and this." You could, think I would. I'm not staying for another year of that.
No, I would obviously coach the season because I mean, what else are you going to do at that point?
Right.
But I'd be out.
I'm gone after this year. I'm taking another job. You can't tell me Garrett Riley didn't have job offers from one season.
No. He could. No. He could go. He could go if he wanted to. So I don't think Dabo's handcuffing him. Look, as much as stuff flack that Dabo gets about certain things that he says in the media, and maybe people disagree with him about this or that, I don't think there's any question that the guy wants to win. And if you bring in a guy like Garrett Riley, you bring him in because you want to win. And guess what? You fired a Clemson guy, a through and through Clemson guy, a guy that was a quarterback at Clemson, had been at Clemson for literally forever. And you fired him after one season. You don't do that unless you want to win football games and you don't think that dude can do it. And then you bring in a guy like Garrett Riley. It wouldn't make sense to handcuff that dude. I think it goes.
If you wanted
deep.
a guy that was that just did what you said. You should have just kept.
You would have kept Brandon Streeter. He's going to do exactly what you tell him to do, right? So if that was the case, the easy thing for Dabo to do would just be keep Brandon Streeter. That's not what he did. Dabo wants to win, and the thing is I think it goes a lot deeper than some of us Clemson fans kind of understand the personnel issues that we have had. And that could be coaching. I think that's someone coaching and a lack of development. Some of it is on missing in the recruiting. Some of it is on injuries. Some of it is on, execution, so on and so forth, right? But it's a lot of different things. We hope that the second year in Garrett Riley's offense is going to be a lot better. We hope that, he has grown. I mean, let's remember that Garrett Riley is also a very young coach, right? Like he's still learning as well. He's not like this, finished product. He's still learning. He's still a young coach. He's still developing as a play caller, and he's still learning especially
since it's his first year not being with his mentor.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Everywhere he had been with Sonny Dykes. It was, it's a guy that Garrett Riley called the plays, but his offensive philosophy, all of that takes heavily from Sonny Dykes and just growing up and obviously, he has his brother and all of that, and they certainly have their own offensive philosophy. But, this is the first time where he doesn't have that. That was the first year. So, you can't, discount that as a factor as well. I mean, all of those things you said, he's still a young, inexperienced coach that has a really bright future, and he's a really bright offensive mind, but still really young and this is the first year where he didn't have all the pieces that he needed to be as successful as he thought he was going to be.
And
that's kind of tough.
Yeah, it's tough, and he's got a lot of work to do, and the players got a lot of work to do, right? Yeah. And hopefully we can start seeing it come together because I think it was the right hire for Clemson. It just wasn't an instant success, but that doesn't mean it can't be successful. It just wasn't an instant success like we thought it was going to be last season, and that was probably wishful thinking on our part, right? Yeah. You saw how broken that Clemson offense was for 2 straight seasons, so it was probably wishful thinking and a little naive on Clemson fans' part to just think Garrett Riley was going to roll in and just solve all the Clemson problems on the offensive side of the ball. Right. That's just I don't know if there was a coach out there that could have done that. Whether it was Garrett Riley or some other amazing offensive mind that you want to name. Clemson's problems, obviously ran deeper than maybe any of us thought.
Scheme, yeah.
It wasn't just scheme. It wasn't just play calling, obviously. So, hopefully those are, still being corrected and will continue to be corrected, and we can grow and develop. And, it looks a little bit closer to what we thought the Garrett Riley system would look like at Clemson.
Absolutely. Go Tigers says on NFL Network, they were saying this morning Rook was later first, early second round pick. So if he has a great combine, he could be a mid first round pick. Yeah, potentially. The thing with the NFL is the NFL draft, it only takes one team to really want you and see value in you. And then all of a sudden that's where you are. I think Rook is absolutely a first round talent. I think he has his best football, and he's one of those guys. I think his best football is still ahead of him. He was a really good player here, but I think he's still scratching the surface because he just hasn't played football as long as the guys he's competing against. And so I think he's got all. He gets in with NFL coaching and gets a chance. Maybe he's not a guy that you start right away. But I think he's a guy that could be, he has a really high upside and could be, one of those guys you're talking about in a few years. He's one of the best, defensive tackles, and kind of like what Dexter Lawrence was. Not the same player, but Dexter Lawrence came in. You saw all the tools and ability, and it took him a little bit. But once he got, especially when he got into the right system and the right coach that saw his ability. Now he's arguably the best defensive lineman playing right now. Now he's named Aaron Donald.
Right. Now he's a 2-time All-Pro, right?
Right.
He's just season after season just performing at the top of the NFL, right?
Yep.
But, so I think Rook probably has the highest ceiling out of all those dudes in the draft right now, as far as Clemson 100%. Players go. He's got a chance to be really, really good in the NFL. It's crazy how good he is now and how little he's played football.
Yep.
It just doesn't make sense, man.
That was a hell of an evaluation because a random and he was playing defensive end in high school, but some random undersized, defensive end from Michigan. Clemson went and got him, and
it's crazy.
Yeah, and a guy that hadn't played football, he had only been playing football for a year at that point, and you turn him into a potential first-round pick.
That's one of those dudes that everybody looks sideways like, why are they offering him? Like, what? Yeah. Who is that? Rook Rower.
What is that? Clemson and these difficult to pronounce names. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they go looking for these dudes at this point.
Yeah, they do.
We do it on purpose.
I think we do. Let's see. John asks a baseball question. He says, "What's your prediction on this weekend series?" I'm thinking lose Friday, win Saturday, and Sunday. And I understand. I know why you said lose Friday, considering who's starting. But you know, I've kind of gone back and forth because it's always with this series it's really difficult to predict because you've only had 2 weekends, and Clemson has shown some really good stuff. This lineup can hit, that's for sure. They can rake. But the pitching has been spotty at times. So really the bullpen. But even some one or two of your Friday guys, not Friday guys, but guys you expected to be Friday/weekend guys haven't really shown up. And obviously the guy you thought was going to be your best guy coming in hasn't really pitched that much in Austin Gordon. So you're kind of in a tough spot. You have a lot of talent. And I think Jimmy Bellinger, Clemson's pitching coach, I think he has a lot of clay to mold with, but not a lot of finished products. Like I think Aiden Kanak is going to be he's going to be an amazing pitcher. And he's going to be, I think he's the Sunday starter. So I'm excited to see how that goes. But Billy Barlow is a guy that, he has good stuff, but he can't find his command it just hasn't been there. And he got shelled. He's gotten shelled a couple of times now. And it's just makes you kind of scratch your head and worry about that Friday, that game tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough to predict, but South Carolina hasn't been immune to issues as well. They've had some hitting lulls in a couple of their games. I think their bullpen is really good, but I think they're very kind of like what Clemson was under their previous head coach.
Yeah.
They're heavy hitters. They hit for power, but they've done a good job at drawing walks, but they're not really a small ball type team, kind of like what Eric Bakich wants to be at Clemson. So those are two conflicting styles, and we'll kind of see how it goes. If South Carolina's bats are hot, they're going to be tough to beat. I don't think either team sweeps. I'm going to say Clemson takes 2 of 3. But
that's what I was going to say. I don't know if I'm going to predict any particular game that they're going to take. I guess I'll go with John on the Friday loss, but
yeah,
I think 2 to 3. Shout out to our boy Will Taylor too for
3 home runs, man.
Breaking that. Hey, what a way to break a hitting slump, dude. He was like, 0 for 22 or 0 for 23.
It was something ridiculous like that.
And then just goes yard 3 times. I mean, I can't think of a better way to break a hitting slump.
That was pretty nice. He even got a shout out from Kirk Herbstreit on Twitter. So that was cool.
What a way to do it. So shout out to him, former Clemson football player.
Absolutely. Thank you for the baseball question. We haven't talked about, we
don't
like we said, this time is you guys' time. So you can ask us anything. It can be about Clemson football, any Clemson sport, could be life, general questions, favorite food, movie. I don't know. You can ask whatever you want.
Yeah. While we're talking about baseball, shout out to the softball team. But I don't know if you saw the softball game last night, but I did see it. That was that was tough, man. That was a tough loss. That was a heartbreaker. I felt it coming, unfortunately, though.
Yeah.
I think
we left too many on base. I mean, how many? Yeah, we left 14, 15 on stranded or something like that.
Yeah,
14 runners on base.
I think we ended up leaving 14 stranded. We had the bases loaded twice. And didn't score any runs.
That's something the baseball team has done a lot this year too.
From that. And then I think towards the end, obviously it went extra innings. Georgia got that walk-off hit, and you could tell in that 8th inning that Valerie didn't have it anymore.
Yeah, and she pitched a hell of a game.
She pitched great, and I don't fault her at all. I just think Rittman should have made a change in at pitcher. I just think she was gassed at that point. Yeah. I mean, she was up over probably 120, 130 pitches at that point. So,
I understand in retrospect. And in reality, you should – I mean, that loss was on the offense.
For sure.
Driving runners in. Like, you can't leave 14. That was you out-hit – well, I think they finished with the same amount of hits, but you out-hit Georgia in regulation innings, whatever you call it.
Yeah, no, they 100% did.
and you left all those runners on, but you left the bases loaded. You know, you deserved. I mean, you get what you deserve like, at the end of the day. So like, and it was such a missed opportunity. That's a good Georgia team. You know, they're going to be.
It's a very, and it'd have been such a good win.
They might be the best team in the SEC.
For that softball team. Like it would have been such a statement win for Clemson, especially heading into the weekend and opening up ACC play and all that stuff. It would have been a really good win to get, but unfortunately they didn't get it. I think they should have made a pitching change, not because, you know, obviously Valerie's the best pitcher on the team, the best player on the team, but she was just gassed at that point. And I think maybe Georgia seeing a different hitter at that point would have probably, you know, bode well. You know, at a certain point when you bat around and the same batters have seen the same pitcher, you know, 4 times, 5 times, eventually they're going to start, you know, with a team as good as Georgia, they're going to start putting it together, right? So, you know, it is what it is. They didn't get it done offensively. Timely hitting was not their strong suit. So on to ACC play. So shout out to both the baseball and the softball team. Hopefully they have great weekends, especially the baseball team playing against the Gamecocks. We got to at least take 2 out of 3 in that series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have to.
Let's see. Jay asked thoughts on the first team offensive line group. Saw Harris Sewell on second team. Yeah. And you know, that's going to be that's the other big question about spring. Cause it's, you know, again, we talk about it, you know, new offensive line coach. I mean, especially of the caliber of Matt Luke, you know, you bring him in and you let him evaluate who he thinks is the best.
Once you hire a coach like Matt Luke, no one's a starter anymore. You're just the offensive line group, and you know, he rolls in there, he evaluates, and I trust that he will make the right decisions and come up with the 5 best players that are give us the best chance in winning in 2024. That's what I think. And there's you talking about the OL. It's going to be a battle at center. You know, who's going to come out? Is it going to be Harris Sewell? Is it going to be Ryan Lithicum?
Trent Howard.
You know,
Elijah Thurman.
I think it's Elijah Thurman was mentioned as possibly being a center.
I think it's I think right now, as it stands, I think it's Harris Sewell or Ryan Linthicum. I think those are the main 2, and then I think, you know, Trent Howard and Elijah Thurman are on the horizon, and you know, maybe they're going to train them up to be options, but I certainly think those are the 2 vying for it right now. For the most part. And so, well, that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think there are 3 guys I feel confident, I feel confident saying will start.
Yeah.
I think Walker Parks.
Absolutely.
I believe that's your best guy. I believe Marcus Tate.
Yep. And then
Blake Miller.
Thank you. I was trying to think of his name.
Yeah. I think those guys will play.
Yep. 100%. I think those 3 will be starters.
Yeah. But beyond that,
left tackle, center are up in the air. Those 2 positions are really up in the air. Like you, I feel pretty good about those 3 you mentioned. You know, now, granted, they could lose their job. I mean, I don't think it's, you know, 100% guaranteed, but you feel like those 3 will probably come out of spring and start the season, at least barring injury, as the starters. But you know, we'll see. That's one of the huge questions coming out of spring, man. Like that's one of the outside of defensive end. That's another very hot topic. In spring is how that offensive line is going to look, because we need them. We need them to take a step. We need them to progress. Because with Moffitt getting the bulk of the carries this year, I mean, you know, he could really have a monster season if that offensive line can put it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Will asks a good question. Obviously, he has a vested interest. He asked, will Ronan Hannafin have a chance to start? a chance to start, I would doubt it.
I don't think so.
And I think because he's injured in the spring, I think that kind of limits his ability. But he was he did come in special teams last year. I think that's largely going to be his role. But I think there's a chance, especially if he gets back healthy and in the fall, because the staff, they love him. I think he'll have more opportunities this fall, but it's just going to be about how much and how quickly does he get back up to speed once he recovers. But yeah, to start, I think there are too many bodies in front of him, barring something crazy. He just has a breakout.
That's a crowded receiving room, dude.
It is
that wide receiving room is crowded. We'll see who steps forward and who secures the playing time. But I mean, you think about it, it's a good problem to have because those dudes are going to be competing hard for playing time. They're going to be in a hard fought battle for playing time over there because there's a lot of good guys, and there's a lot of guys that have produced pretty well for Clemson already that will be fighting for playing time. So you can only run so many guys out there first, and Ronan probably won't be one of those dudes.
No, I would be surprised, but I really like Ronan Hannafin. I really liked him as a prospect, and so, but I think his path to playing time is a little bit more long term, just because of where things are from a numbers standpoint. It's just crowded, but I think he'll get opportunities, and I think he'll, maybe he has some ability in some special play situations. Maybe you draw up something for him as a change of pace. He's a really great blocker, and so I think he has some. I think he has some utility, and you can find ways to get him onto the field. But as a guy, we expect him to be a major contributor and start. No, I don't.
That could be his way on the field. I mean, Garrett Riley's system is predicated on very good perimeter blocking. So that could be one of his ways that he gets on the field. I know he's a big time special teams guy. He loves getting out there and laying it on the line.
Yeah, I mean, he played linebacker. Yeah, he played linebacker in high school too. So that's
he's not comfortable. He's not scared. He's a physical guy. So he could have a path. I mean, you never know. Look, he's got a shot, but it is a crowded wide receiver room, so it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. Tony asks, any news on possible conference realignment involving Clemson? Tony,
maybe.
Your guess is as good as mine. A lot of this stuff is in the dark. I mean, we'll see. I know all I know is they're working behind the scenes, but as far as anything coming soon, I don't know. I really don't know.
As per Clemson's MO, they're not going to talk about anything publicly.
Yeah. Clemson has taken quite the opposite approach to all this than Florida State has. Not saying that's what Florida State did is a bad thing, but
no.
They just had very different ways of going about it.
Yeah, I think they're both trying to achieve the same thing. They're just going about it two different ways. And
right.
I think eventually they're both leaving the ACC, so the end result will probably
I lean that way.
The exact same.
David Wood asked, do you think Brenningstool will have an All-American year? I think he certainly has the potential, and Dabo said the sky's the limit for him, and I tend to agree. I mean, you saw you saw how good he was when
he put it together.
Yeah, when they committed to involving him in the passing game, good things happened.
Yep. He started really putting it together at the end of last season. Yeah. You saw his potential really start to take shape as the season progressed, and hopefully he hits the ground running this spring. And I think they've kind of figured out some things that kind of get him involved and where he fits in best in this offense. So, I'm with you. I think he could absolutely have that kind of season. If he gets the right opportunities in this offense. I mean, we've talked about it at length on this channel about how much of a nightmare matchup wise he is for defenses. I mean,
man.
as a linebacker, as a safety, like you don't want to see that guy, man. Like it's just like physically you are at a disadvantage no matter what.
Yep.
When you got a guy that is that big, that has the ball skills that Burning Stool has, it's not a good situation to be in. So if we can find a way to consistently use him the right way, that could be a real problem for defenses.
And he showed it. Yeah.
Yeah, he showed the ability last season towards the end. So let's just hope we can build on that, because we better not go back to we get to the end of a game, Jordan, and we're like, where was Brenningstool? Like that.
Yeah.
That can't happen no more. Not with a guy like that.
No,
you gotta use him. He's too much of a weapon.
Absolutely. Michael says, I still see Dabo going in the portal post spring for a defensive end. I mean, I think as it stands now, I think that's pretty unlikely. Just how he was talking about it. But again, he said he didn't say, but he said in the past that if the right guy comes, that's who they'll go get. But right now, they don't see anybody that they think could help them right now. So whether that's true, whether that's correct or not, that's
I don't know that I buy all that, but
I mean, I don't know, but I'm not really in tune with the portal right now as far as who's it. And obviously things will look different once these teams really get into spring practice and guys kind of figure out their roles and choose what they decide to do.
Yeah, and it would also depend on turnover on Clemson's roster,
right?
And then who's in the portal as a defensive end, right? They're not just going to go get anybody,
right?
I think if Clemson gets a defensive end, it's going to be somebody that can contribute right now. They have plenty of depth that needs to be developed. If they go to the portal, the only thing that I would think to go to the portal for to make sense would be a guy to play right now, to play significant, if not starting snaps for you. So if you're not going to do that, or that guy doesn't exist out there for whatever reason, there's no use in going to the portal for a defensive end. They don't need it. They don't need a guy that needs a year or two of development. They need a guy that can win right now.
Absolutely. John asked the question. He said, "Does the Texas Tech players' flat Earth and bird ideas have Jordan rethinking with astrophysics hypotheses?" Yeah, if you guys don't know what he's talking about, there was a Texas Tech player at the combine. What's his name? Was it Cole? I'm blanking on his name right now, but they asked him. I heard his response, but I didn't hear the question. But he talked about the Earth being flat and we're under a dome and all that. So I was, I kind of treat that kind of stuff the same way I did Kyrie. I'm like, well, neither of them are authorities on science or anything like that. So it's whatever. I mean, it's your personal belief. It's wrong, but it's not harming anybody.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing, right? Like, if we are, so what? Yeah. What does it change? What does it change?
Yeah.
I mean, is it going to change your life tomorrow if that's true?
No. Not really. I mean, not as far as I mean, it would be, from a scientific standpoint, sure, but not
for sure, a
day-to-day
but
life.
From like a day-to-day life, like normal people, like it's not going to change your life. So does it really matter? Like, why are you losing sleep over this stuff? Who cares?
Right.
leave it to those people to figure it out.
David says Riley is loving the upstate Clemson coach lifestyle. I mean, yeah, he has fun on social media at times, for sure. And I know he loves being at Clemson, so that's a good thing. Because after how last season went, some guys would have said, okay, this ain't gonna work, and I think he believes in what they're trying to accomplish here, and obviously he came to Clemson for a reason, and he wanted to accomplish something that he hasn't so far in his career. So that's I think that speaks to I think that speaks to him as a coach, and obviously he is certainly young and has a lot of aspirations, but he's willing to, he wants to be a part of something before he goes out and does his own thing. So that's cool. Let's see. Jay asked, did we get any player availability for today's practice? Well, we did read off the list that Dabo gave yesterday. I don't know of any updates or changes so far to that list. So as things stand, they're the same as they were yesterday. So, but again, we'll go back and this is for everybody. And we talked about earlier in the show, we put timestamps at the end once we go off. So if you missed something you wanted to hear us talk about, those will be in the description. So make sure to check those out. Those of you on the rewatch too. John, a strong lacrosse midfielder can be in reference to Ronan Hannafin. He says, we'll see. Skills transfer well. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's one thing that's the thing that Clemson loved about him, and what they love in their wide receivers in general is being multi-sport athletes. And Ronan Hannafin certainly fits the bill. He's just great athlete all around. And I mean, he has all the physical tools. So, I mean, I think he's got the opportunity to be a really good player here. So you just got to, I think it's a product of kind of the wide receiver room is kind of, as we said, it's kind of crowded right now, and there's a lot of bodies, and there's some guys ahead of him that are just Clemson needs to play more. Adam Randall, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, Troy Stellato. I mean, a lot of these guys have just been in the program longer. Cole Turner. So that's kind of where it is. Will says that he's a stud. Yeah, I mean, I loved his tape. Yeah, he can flat out play, and so that's what's exciting. Is I think Clemson's wide receiver room, as much flack as it's gotten over the past couple of seasons. I think last year they were, if it weren't for the injuries, when they were healthy, I thought they were in a good spot, and as good as they've been in a while. And I think this year, with guys being farther removed from some of those injuries, I think they have a chance to be kind of more akin to what we've seen in the past from Clemson wide receivers. So, but it's all about putting it together, and again, at the end of the day, you got to see it. So,
got to see it on the field. It's got to translate to the field. Gotta be lucky to have some health and not have so many injuries, which we have not been very good in that department for really the past 3 years, especially at the wide receiver position. But hopefully we're going to turn the corner with that. I think we got more depth in there than we've had in several years, so that'll obviously help when it comes to injuries and attrition and things like that throughout the season. So we're in a good spot, I think, as a wide receiver room.
Yeah. The wide receiver is certainly, I mean, they have some things to prove, but I think the tools in the toolbox are there.
Yeah.
We're not missing somebody that we desperately need. But I think all the tools to have an explosive offense and a really good offense next year are in that wide receiver room right now.
I agree.
So, and I don't think you could have said that at least a couple of years ago. So
no, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah, Jay says if Brenny could improve his blocking, that's
not his calling. Yeah, it's not his calling card. He's not great at it.
And as we've said, I mean that's just, I mean, he's not physically, like, that's just not it. He's not in a physical standpoint to really be that effective of a blocker. Right. It's not. I don't watch him and say, oh man, he's not trying. I think he doesn't. He's just never going, unless he puts on a ton of weight, at the expense of his athleticism.
Which is not why you have a guy like that on the roster. Like,
right.
You don't want him to put on a ton of weight,
right.
because then he's not as explosive. He's not as athletic. He's not
Yeah.
as big of an issue for the opposing defense.
Yeah,
So.
he's got a wiry frame. Like, he's not a guy that can put on a ton of weight. He's not one of those freaks that can just put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle and keep his speed and all that and not be and be the same player. He's not. That's not him. He needs like where he's at. That's where he's best at as a receiving threat. All of that. I mean, we make the Jordan Leggett comparisons all the time. I mean, that's it, but it's the same. It's the same thing. Like, he just was never going to be that great of a blocker. I mean, Leggett was a little bit bigger, but they were very similar as far as just kind of, that was their effectiveness and their role in the offense was being a big play, threat and being a matchup nightmare in the passing game. That's what they were. And I think Brenningstool has the chance to be, have a way better season than Jordan Leggett ever did. But it's all about getting him involved. And so that's and making a concerted effort to keep him involved and create opportunities for him, because he's got, I mean, he would be so, I think his production would be so much better at this point if they had done a better job of doing that, especially last year, because man, there were times where, like, oh man, he would look unstoppable, and then he would go missing for an entire, maybe he'd go missing the next week, and you're like, oh man, he only finished with 2 catches. And you're like, you can't do that. And it wasn't because he wasn't getting open. As we've talked about, there were open receivers, and
there were.
Jake Brenningstool had a lot of games where he got open and didn't see the ball for one reason or the other. So that's the thing we're contending with, and that's the thing that has to improve from last year. All right. I think that's going to do it. Hitting the 2.5 hour mark. You have anything else?
I do not have anything else. I think that's a good place to go ahead and wrap it up. Our show went way longer tonight just because of all the spring practice news and all that kind of stuff. But we really do appreciate every single one of you for showing up and sticking it out. We are literally hours, 2.5 hours to to be exact, into the show right now, and you guys are still sticking it out with us. We got 23 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. Me and Jordan love coming on and doing the show. One of our favorite things to do every single week. And you guys are what makes it special. You guys are what makes it worth doing, because if there was nobody here to interact and talk with us, we could just call each other on the phone and do this instead of doing it on YouTube. But thank you guys so much for supporting the show, showing up week in and week out, and sharing it with your friends and sharing it with people. We really do appreciate that. Look for our timestamps that will be in the description of the video. That'll say the topics and the times that you can speed up to if you're watching this in the rewatch, or if you're in the live chat right now and you want to go back and hear what we said about a certain segment. Those will be in the description of the video, probably between 10 and 15 minutes after the show ends. So thank you guys so much for showing up. Again, we will be back here next Thursday, 7 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. Hope you guys will be back next week, and I'm sure we will have plenty more spring practice to cover. And I'm sure something else is crazy is going to happen in college football between now and then. That'll keep us busy and give us plenty to talk about. But until then, Jordan, go ahead and send the people off.
Yeah, guys. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. Just continually, we're blessed to do this each and every week. So I'm glad you guys keep showing up and hearing what we have to say. We'll see you guys next week. There will certainly be more to come and talk about regarding spring practice. A lot of new nuggets and big moments, players showing out. We'll talk about whatever else you want to talk about. Like we said, big series for baseball this week, and basketball is starting to find its groove. So heading into the tournament. So lot of big things for Clemson athletics. Softball is keeping it rolling as well. Obviously, tough loss last night, but still think they're a really, really good team, and just they got some things to work on. So big time in Clemson athletics, and we'll be here to talk about it next week.
Absolutely, guys. Until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.